So I have to tell you a quick story about this song that Jonathan just played. Some of you, if you've been on Facebook this week, may have seen that it got posted a couple of times. And it describes what we're going to do over the next 6 weeks so perfectly. Finding God, whether it's through Andy's amazing images or some other means, finding God in everyday, ordinary stuff, in places where we least likely expect to find God to show up. Jonathan played that song that he just played for the offertory during our evening edition of our Ash Wednesday service. And I see the preacher's husband sitting in the back. And I see David Thompson sitting in the back. The two of them together is frightening a little. And they're doing this when Jonathan is playing that song. And I can't quite figure out what Jonathan is playing, which is why he's hiding. But he can hear me. And we get done, and Ryan, my husband, comes up to me, and he goes, "That was so awesome." Oh, there you are. Jonathan, not Ryan. Oh, there you are. Yes. Ryan comes up, and he goes, "Oh, my gosh. That was so cool. I never thought of that as an Ash Wednesday or a Lenten hymn before, but that is the perfect Lenten song." And I'm like, "I don't know what it was." And he goes, "No, you wouldn't. Just why I have them in my life, right?" He said, "Honey, it's 9-inch nails." 9-inch nail, is it a 90s, Jonathan? 90s grunge rock band from Seattle. Not typically something that, one might hear in church. But then, the song was so beloved by a certain country western singer, a guy you may know, called Johnny Cash. It was so beloved by Johnny Cash that Johnny Cash made a cover of a 9-inch nail song. Now that's a little weird. So that song, sung by Johnny Cash, is posted to the Facebook, and I'll repost it again this afternoon if you want to listen to it. But this is one of those places when I talked about Andy being able to see with his eyes and through the lens of his camera, his gift for finding God in those everyday moments through the lens of his camera. Jonathan does that for us, and so does John Stafford, by the way. Jonathan does that for us with everyday secular music that you hear on the radio and makes them sacred when we look at them through the lens of the holy. And I think that's really exciting. That's really cool. When we help one another to look and see the divine all around us in all the ordinary moments, in the ways we don't expect them. And that's what we're going to try to do during this Lenten journey together. We'll have lyrics. They're in the devotional book, and I hope you'll pick one up. There are lyrics from songs and poems and quotes and all sorts of ordinary, everyday, non-Jesus-y kinds of things to help you walk in the ways of Jesus. And each week, one of the icons from Andy will be on the cover. I love this first one. I love it. I may blow it up as big as me and hang it in my office. I love it so much. I've already warned Andy about that. There is so much going on in this image. And I'm going to let you sit with it, and there are questions in the devotional for you to sit with it. But we're going to use this morning to help us look at this passage that Jeannie read for us from the book of Matthew. Each week during our Lenten journey, we will be walking with Matthew through Matthew's gospel to explore the stories of Jesus. And if you were listening to that scripture as Jeannie was reading it, and some of you are really churchy people, you know that, I know that. You're churchy people. You've done a lot of church in your day. And so some of you may have been sitting there thinking, John the Baptist, prepare the way of the Lord. Isn't that a Christmas scripture? Don't we read that in December? Jeannie was thinking that as she read that this morning. We read this in December. And John picks that great song about prepare the way of the Lord that goes over and over and over. What are we doing reading this in Lent? Well, I happen to like it in Lent for a couple of reasons. The first thing you have to remember is that if you jump out of Matthew's gospel, where we are, over into Luke's gospel, you will remember that John and Jesus are basically the same age, right? They were born just a few months apart. And if you read carefully in Matthew's gospel, we are here, what Jeannie read was in chapter 3. So, if you flip back, you know Jesus is already born. The wise ones have come and gone. The Holy Family made their escape to Egypt and then back to Nazareth when John shows up preaching in the wilderness. So I actually like this story in Lent because it reminds us that John is not preparing the way with a baby shower. And we tend to think about it sometimes that way if we have the manger out and we're getting ready for Christmas. And sometimes it gets lost, this story of John. It gets lost in the lights and the tinsel and the wrapping paper. And then some of us are fixing such other wonderful holiday treats that we can't bear to think about making a menu of locusts and wild honey. Not on your Christmas dinner list. And then none of us quite know, or most of us, we don't quite know what to do with John's getup. A camel hair dress and a leather belt. But the description of his clothes here in this gospel reading simply isn't, to go back to last weekend's Oscars, this is not an Oscar red carpet question of, who are you wearing, John? Not at all. There's real purpose and intention around the gospel writer telling us what John is wearing. His outfit isn't just for shock factor. You see, John is a classic Hebrew prophet. And in understanding John, you are intended to have a memory evoked of the Old Testament prophet Elijah, the greatest of the Old Testament prophets. John is to remind you of Elijah. Now, because most of us tend not to be scholars of 2 Kings in the Hebrew Bible, you may not know that in 2 Kings, Elijah is described, depending on which translation you use, Elijah is either described as one hairy dude. That's my translation, but you get the idea. One hairy dude, or a guy who is dressed in a hairy garment and wears a leather belt. So if you know that image of Elijah, and you read or hear or see this guy, John, dressed very similarly, John might remind you of Elijah. And in this first century time where Matthew is writing, there was great anticipation and expectation of God setting all things right. You may remember that there were folks living out in Qumran and all sorts of other little exciting end times things happening. And there was supposed to be this something new and great happening. And the return of Elijah was the signal for that something. John was not simply some weird country preacher, y'all. He was the signal that something big was coming. The change was just around the corner. Significant change about how one was to live and see the world. There was a major cultural shift coming, and John was supposed to prepare you for that. And it was interesting this week as I was thinking about John preaching about change, big change. I was reading a book by the great preacher Tom Long who says this about change: real moral change doesn't simply happen through inner resolve. It occurs when people realize that the world has changed around them. Anybody have the world change around them? And I'm not talking about anything that has happened lately that's on the cover of the New York Times or the cover of the Kansas City Star or is the lead breaking news on CNN. I'm talking about you. Because Lent is about you. Our world changes around us all the time. And again, Tom Long says it this way: the most significant changes for most of us come in moments when we find ourselves in situations we never could have imagined. Parents discover their teenager is addicted to alcohol. Your spouse gets sick, very sick, with a chronic illness, and your entire future story changes. Situations we never could have expected. A local school board member of a small community where nothing ever happens, and suddenly the school board is faced with tremendous racial unrest. What are we to do? Because these are moments, as Tom Long says, where the old maps of your life cannot give you all the directions that you need. Because you're looking at the map of your life, at where you are going. And you come to this fork in the road, and you look at the map and you go, "There's no fork here. There's not supposed to be a fork here." And if you use Waze like I do, the little online map on your phone, you hit a little button that says the map is incorrect. That's how much it happens. There's a button on my Waze app that says the map is incorrect. Or you come to a place where there's a stop sign and you're not expecting it. And you slam on the brakes. There didn't used to be a stop sign here. When they put the stop sign in? I've been driving this road for 40 years. There's never been a stop sign here. Now, there used to be a flashing yellow, but never a stop sign, and certainly not a stop light. Seriously. Who decided that was a good idea? How do we navigate those moments as people of faith? And how do we prepare ourselves to navigate such moments? Such moments when the old maps no longer serve us. Because no matter what road we are on, we inevitably end up at some place where we end up looking at this sign. I love this image. And several people upstairs this morning were asking Andy, and I encourage you to go upstairs and look at, do you see the little red spot? See what I mean? Go upstairs and look and see what that little red sign says. There is so much going on in this image. I got like 10 sermons in my head around this image. I'm only going to preach two. This sign, something has happened. Something has changed. There's still this arrow, and I don't know if it was originally red or if the red is the rust. But there is still this arrow pointing in this way, but you're missing the details. And it's been interesting over the last several days of people telling me, oh, Shanna, you know what I think that is? I think that's an old hotel, an old roadside hotel, like on Route 66, you know, maybe. Somebody else, you know what I think that is? I think that's an old drive-in movie theater, maybe. But something changed, and the details got lost, or the details of the sign no longer applied to the way that it was pointing. I feel like this sign, this is so fascinating to me. I feel like it symbolizes walking a life of faith. Like we know the general direction that God is pointing for us. We feel like we know the general direction, but the details are kind of sketchy. Where exactly are we going? And how exactly are we supposed to get there? And that's why I think this Lenten journey, every Lenten journey, can be so important. It reminds us to get grounded once again in our own GPS system. You know the GPS on your Apple phone or your whatever phone? Some of you have one of those that you put in where you're going, and it tells you right where to go. You don't even have to look if you connect it to your BlackBerry on the car. She'll tell you, in 400 feet, turn right. If only it were that easy, right? But the Lenten journey is about listening for those moments where God is whispering, 400 feet, turn right. But we got to be listening. We got to be paying attention. For all the moments, and the thing, I don't know about your GPS, but mine, I have this British woman in my phone, and she says to me, because I went left in 400 feet instead of right, she says to me, rerouting. I don't know what yours says. Mine says, rerouting. And she says it in this condescending tone. Right? That's how mine says anyway. Maybe yours is very positive and encouraging. Mine is condescending. Because I've made a wrong turn. You know, and Lent, however, is more than simply rerouting. It's more like reorienting. Reorienting, I think, is really perhaps what John is challenging his listeners and us to do. It's more than just repenting, is more than just feeling sorry for the stuff you did. It's more than that. It's not just guilt. It's not just feeling sorry. It's about really realizing that the details have fallen off and you're not quite sure where you're going, but you know you better turn around. Which is why some folks translate it, return to God. But it's like when you look at this sign and you realize you got to take your life off autopilot. Because you're flying down I-70 across Kansas, and there's no reason to stop. You're just driving at 85 miles an hour across I-70. And that's easy. It's a lot different if you take an old 2-lane highway across Kansas, because there's stop signs, and there's curves in the road, and there's Ys in the road where you're not expecting them. And so we got to take it off autopilot, because otherwise we'll miss it. We'll miss it. Now, some of you may think that the goal for us during Easter, and you're going to have an opportunity in your devotional book to talk about, in your journal, to think about what your intention is, what your goal is, what you're hoping for during this Lenten season. And for me, I have one for us collectively in addition to my own personal one, of course. But you may think that our goal is to fill in all of these details in Andy's sign. That's not the goal. I don't think that's the goal anyway. My goal for us is the exact opposite. My goal for you is the exact opposite. My goal is that when we get to Holy Week, and we're going to pull this image out again on Palm Sunday, that you'll be better able to sit with this image and not need to fill in all the details that have fallen off the sign. Maybe you'll be able to sit with the uncertainty and in the quiet, listen for your internal God GPS to tell you when to turn right in 400 feet. But that only happens when we slow down enough to listen. And the certainty of Easter is that, I think, you never get all the answers filled in. Because if you have all the answers, I don't know what you need God for. I've said it like 3 weeks in a row now, but I love a paper map. I love a paper map. So I know where I'm going. I know how I'm going to get there. I can plan it. I got it figured out. I can look at the map and go, oh, there it is. Look at that. The map says this is going to happen in just a little bit. I love a paper map. And it's great for our summer vacation to get me to some small mountain town in New Mexico. But I don't know that it's all that helpful for our life of faith. Because just when you think you got the map all plotted out, that you know exactly which exit and where to turn and what to go, you got all the blanks filled in, you can put your life on cruise control because you know where you're going. Speed bump. They scare the dickens out of you. Sometimes they make you cry. Speed bump. Didn't see that coming. That wasn't on the map. And we often think of speed bumps as bad things. Those things that throw us off. But they're not. Sometimes they're good. Awesome new job. Great promotion. We got to move where? I got to go to LA. I got to go Kansas City. Maybe that was some of you once upon a time in moving to Kansas City. Friends, if we can practice this Lenten kind of GPS, this walking this road of faith with Jesus, if we can allow our journey to unfold, listening and watching carefully, instead of trying so desperately to control the journey and everything and everybody in it. If we can do that, if we can practice that during this Lenten season, with living this journey as this sign, as our guide, if we can prepare ourselves, if we can prepare our spirits and the way we live during this Lenten season, then maybe when we hit those speed bump moments, we'll be a little better able to navigate them. I'm not saying always, but I'm saying sometimes when we realize that the details no longer apply and we hear our internal GPS saying, rerouting, it won't be quite so scary. Because we will remember that we are Easter people on a road towards Easter. And we may not always know exactly where that road is leading or exactly where the arrow is pointing, but we know we are headed in the direction of God, where we will find life. And maybe, just maybe, we'll even find ourselves on this journey. May it be so. May it be so for us. Amen.